All right, let's dive in. So you sent in some audio from lectures on evil, and it seems you're really fascinated by this idea of empathy, or rather a lack of it. So basically, we're going to go deep into 0 degrees of empathy, thanks to you.
It really is. It's interesting, how the lectures uh, encourage a different way of thinking about people who do things that we might consider evil. Instead of just saying, well, they're bad, it asks, what if, um, what if there's something else going on?
Yeah, and that's what we're here to unpack.
Yeah.
So the excerpts you sent focus on three specific types: borderlines, psychopaths, and narcissists. We hear these words, but like, what do they even mean? What's the connection to 0 degrees of empathy?
The words, the labels themselves can be kind of misleading, but what's really interesting is the psychology behind them. Let's start with Carol's story. You sent over some pretty intense stuff about her life.
Yeah, her story's it's a tough one. The audio describes like a really rough childhood, to be honest. Her mom seemed emotionally distant, almost cruel sometimes, like she wouldn't even breastfeed Carol.
This early deprivation, as the lecture calls it, has been studied like for decades.
Hmm.
And what they're finding is that these early experiences can really have a lasting impact on a child's development, even neurologically.
It's really sad. They sent her to boarding school when she was only 8, just, left to deal with everything on her own. No wonder she looked for connection in, not so healthy ways like drugs and early sexual experiences. Sounds like she was desperate for some kind of human warmth.
Absolutely. And it's in these kinds of situations that we often see what the lectures label type B, which is borderline personality disorder.
Okay, so help me get this. What does it even mean to be borderline? When I hear that, I think of, someone who's unpredictable, maybe a bit prone to outbursts. Am
Yeah.
I even close?
Well, there's some truth to that. Borderline personality disorder is really about instability, like in relationships, their self-image, their emotions. It's like a constant inner earthquake, shaking their whole sense of being. This can come out as impulsive actions, big mood swings, and sadly a much higher risk of suicidal thoughts and actions compared to everyone else.
The audio actually mentioned that suicide attempts are really common with BPD. That's scary to think about. But where does empathy fit in here?
Well, imagine trying to understand or respond to other people's emotions, but it's like trying to read a language you've never learned.
Yeah.
That's kind of the reality for a lot of people with DPD, and this disconnect can lead to some really rocky relationships.
Yeah.
They're trying to connect, but the way they do it might not come across right.
It makes me think about the manipulative behaviors they mentioned as being common in BPD. How does that tie into this lack of empathy?
Well, if you're trying to connect and it's not working, if people misunderstand you, you might start manipulating to get your needs met. It's like a desperate attempt to control what feels uncontrollable, their emotions and how other people react. Not necessarily malicious, but a way of surviving, of dealing with that deep fear of being abandoned.
It's like they're stuck in this cycle, always reliving that feeling of rejection and trying to protect themselves from being hurt again.
That's a really good point, and it leads us to someone that a lot of people know who probably struggled with BPD, Marilyn Monroe.
Ah, Marilyn Monroe, the icon, the beauty, but with a lot of inner turmoil, right? Everyone knows her name, but not many really understand what she was going through.
Exactly. And when you look at her life, the unstable childhood, the multiple marriages that didn't work out, the constant mental health struggles, and then her suicide, it's a picture that aligns with a lot of the hallmarks of BPD.
It's like a reminder that, behind all the fame and glamour, there was a real person dealing with a lot of pain. So we're seeing how type B plays out, but what starts it all? What leads someone down this path?
Well, the lectures talk about this theory called object relations theory.
Hmm.
It sounds complicated, but it really boils down to how important the relationship between a parent and child is.
Okay, I'm listening. Explain it to me.
Imagine a baby bird. It can't do anything without its mother, right? It needs its mother for food, for warmth.
Yeah.
That's how this theory sees the relationship between an infant and their primary caregiver. They need their emotional needs met consistently to develop a secure sense of self. If those needs are neglected or met inconsistently, it's like the baby bird never learns to fly properly.
So if those needs aren't met, what happens? Like the baby bird never really trusts its wings?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. According to this theory, it can lead to all sorts of problems like trouble forming healthy attachments, struggles with emotions, and yes, problems developing empathy. It's like the blueprint for healthy emotional development gets messed up.
The lecture also mentions abuse and neglect. I imagine those would be especially damaging.
Absolutely. They talk about a strong connection between early trauma and BPD. Not everyone who experiences trauma will develop BPD, but it definitely increases the risk. It's like a wound that never heals, leaving them vulnerable.
So it sounds like nature and nurture are both involved. Maybe there's a genetic predisposition, but the early experiences actually shape how those genes express themselves, and that affects their capacity for empathy.
Exactly. And this leads us to a question that's fascinated researchers for a long time. What's going on in the brain of someone with BPD?
All right, now we're getting to the good stuff. Is there something physically different about the borderline brain?
The research is getting more and more interesting. Studies that use brain imaging, they've shown some pretty important differences in certain areas of the brain.
Yeah.
Especially the parts that deal with processing emotions and empathy.
Hold on, hold on. I need a little brain science lesson here. What are these brain regions and how are they like connected to empathy?
Okay, so think of the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, or VMPFC. That's like the brain's emotional control center. It's always working behind the scenes, regulating emotions, helping us make decisions based on emotional information, and even understand what other people are thinking. But imagine if this control center isn't working right. Emotions could go haywire, leading to those impulsive behaviors and relationship struggles we see in BPD.
So like a malfunctioning control tower. That's a great analogy. The audio also mentioned the amygdala and the temporal cortex. What do those do?
Well, the amygdala is like our internal alarm system. It's always looking for threats, triggering fear responses. The temporal cortex helps us navigate all those social cues, helps us understand what others are thinking and feeling. If these areas are too active or not connected properly, it can lead to misunderstandings, anxieties, and difficulty in seeing social situations accurately.
This is starting to make more sense now. So it's not just about, trying harder to be empathetic. If their brain is like working against them, it makes it so much harder for them.
Exactly. It's not a simple matter of good versus evil, right? It's this mix of biology and experience that shapes how people see and interact with the world.
Wow, this is heavy, but it's really interesting. It's making me rethink my whole idea about people who show these type B traits. Okay, so we've gone deep into the world of borderlines and their struggle with empathy. Now I'm curious about the next type, the psychopaths. The audio talks about a man named Paul. His story sounds like the classic image of a psychopath.
Before we jump into Paul's story, it's important to say that psychopath isn't actually an official diagnosis. It's more of a slang term for what professionals call antisocial personality disorder, with psychopathy being a more severe subtype.
Oh, okay. So it's a terminology thing, but
Yeah.
whatever the label. Let's talk about Paul. His history is disturbing, to say the least. He went from being cruel to animals as a kid to assaults and even murder as an adult. What really struck me was that he didn't seem to feel any remorse. It's like he was totally detached from the pain he was causing.
That lack of remorse, that inability to grasp, to share the feelings of others, that's a defining feature of psychopathy. It's 0 degrees of empathy taken to a scary extreme.
So paint me a picture. What are the classic traits of a psychopath? What should we be looking out for?
The lectures actually give a pretty detailed list, and it's chilling. We're talking about superficial charm, but underneath, a deep lack of empathy, no anxiety, no guilt, Dishonesty and self-centeredness are just part of who they are. They can't form real, lasting relationships, and they don't seem to learn from punishment. Their emotions are shallow. They have no real insight into their own behavior, and they rarely plan for the future. They live in the now. Like, the consequences don't exist.
It's like they're playing a different game, one where the rules of human connection just don't apply. And that lack of anxiety, that lack of guilt, it's like they have no moral compass.
Exactly. And it makes them really difficult to treat, to rehabilitate. Traditional therapy, where you appeal to someone's conscience, their guilt, it doesn't work. They're not on the same wavelength.
The lectures even said something about snakes in suits. What did they mean by that?
It's a scary thought, but it means that not every psychopath ends up in prison. Some of them are very functional, even rising to positions of power. They may not be violent, but they can be incredibly manipulative, destructive. They leave a trail of emotional damage.
Wow. It's unsettling to think that someone could be so charming, so successful, and yet have such a lack of empathy. So what creates a psychopath? Are they born that way, or is it their environment?
It's probably a mix of both, just like with BPD.
Mm-hmm.
But the lectures point to one big risk factor: parental rejection. Remember John Bowlby and his attachment theory?
Vaguely. Remind me.
So Bowlby, he believed that the early bond between a child and their caregiver, it's like the foundation of a house. If it's strong, the house can survive anything.
Yeah.
But if the foundation is weak, or there isn't one, the house is going to collapse.
So are you saying that a child who is constantly rejected by their parents is more likely to have a weak foundation when it comes to emotional development?
Exactly. That early rejection can lead to an insecure attachment style, and that can affect their whole life. They might struggle to form healthy relationships, to control their emotions, and yeah, even to develop those crucial empathy skills.
It's like they never learned how to connect with other people, never developed the ability to truly understand or share other people's feelings.
That's a powerful way to put it. And the lectures suggest that this early deprivation can cause a buildup of rage inside the child.
Yeah.
Imagine constantly being rejected. That basic need for love and connection. It's not met. It's a recipe for resentment and anger.
So this rage, how does it play into psychopathy? Does it somehow like block empathy from developing?
It's like this. When a child is consumed by their own pain and anger, it becomes almost impossible for them to see beyond themselves. They're so focused on their own needs, on protecting themselves from more hurt, that they just shut down emotionally. And that wall they build around themselves, it makes it really, really hard to connect with others, to understand their feelings, and to develop a sense of right and wrong that's based on anything other than just surviving.
It's like they create their own emotional wasteland, no compassion, no connection. So we've talked about early experiences and this buildup of rage, but what about what's happening inside the mind of a psychopath? How do they experience the world?
The research suggests they process emotions differently from people who are neurotypical. When they see images of people in distress, for example, their bodies don't react in the way we'd expect.
So they see the pain, but they don't feel it. That's both fascinating and disturbing.
Exactly. Their lack of empathy, it's not an act. It's reflected in their physiological responses. It's important to remember that self-report measures, like empathy tests, those can be unreliable, especially with psychopaths who are, masters of manipulation.
Of course, they're experts at deception. So if self-reporting isn't reliable, how do researchers study what's going on inside the mind of a psychopath?
That's where brain imaging comes in. It allows us to see what's happening in real time.
All right, brain time again. What have scientists discovered about the psychopathic brain?
What they're finding is pretty consistent with what we've been talking about. Psychopaths tend to show less activity in those key areas of the empathy circuit, the ones we discussed earlier.
Okay, I need a refresher. We've got the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC. Remind me what that does again?
Think of it as the CEO of emotional regulation. It's the part that keeps our impulses under control, helps us make decisions based on emotions, helps us understand other people's points of view. But in psychopaths, it's like the CEO is on a permanent vacation.
So their emotional control center is slacking off. What about the amygdala? That's the fear center, right?
Yes, and studies have shown that psychopaths often have a blunted response in the amygdala when they're exposed to things that would normally, trigger fear. It's like their internal alarm system isn't working right, making them less sensitive to the threat of punishment. They're less likely to feel anxiety when they're hurting others.
It's a chilling thought that the very thing that keeps most of us from doing harm might be broken in psychopaths. What about the superior temporal sulcus, the STS? Where does that fit in with empathy?
The STS is like our social decoder. It helps us interpret facial expressions, body language, all those subtle cues, and lets us understand the intentions and emotions of other people. But if this area isn't functioning properly, it can lead to social awkwardness, misinterpretations, and difficulty empathizing.
So we've got three brain areas that might be underperforming: the
Yeah.
VMPFC, the amygdala, and the STS. It's like their empathy circuitry is fried, making it almost impossible for them to connect with others, emotionally.
That's a great way to put it. And the lectures even suggest that these brain differences might be connected to bigger issues with executive control. Executive control is like the brain's management team, the one in charge of planning, decision making, and stopping impulsive behaviors. Problems in the frontal lobes where this control center is could explain the reckless and impulsive things we see psychopaths doing.
So it's not just a lack of empathy, it's also a lack of control. Like they have trouble regulating their urges.
Exactly. It's complicated. The lectures talk about a system called the behavioral inhibition system, or BIS. It's really important for learning from punishment.
And psychopaths might have an underactive BIS.
That's the theory.
Yeah.
And it could explain why they don't seem to learn from their mistakes, why they do things that have, bad consequences, and why punishment often doesn't stop them. It's like the feedback loop that helps most of us, adjust our behavior. It's broken.
So we're seeing a pattern here. These brain differences may be combined with early experiences of rejection and neglect. They could be contributing to a whole bunch of challenges, from problems with emotional regulation to this profound lack of empathy and remorse.
Exactly. And while it's important to recognize the destructive things associated with psychopathy, understanding these underlying mechanisms can help us, approach the issue with more nuance.
It's a good reminder that behavior isn't always a simple choice, between good and evil. Sometimes there are deeper forces at work, things that might be beyond a person's conscious control.
Okay, so we've covered two of these 0 degrees of empathy talks from the lectures. Next is narcissism, and I'm interested to see how this personality type fits into the puzzle.
Yeah.
We meet a guy named James. His story seems to be like the textbook definition of a narcissist.
James is a perfect example of how narcissism, what the lectures call type N, can show up in everyday life. It's not always about, big dramatic acts of cruelty. Sometimes it's the subtle, the insidious things that are the most damaging. From what I got from the audio, James sounds like a real handful. He's always complaining, demanding special treatment, bragging about himself and his family. The lectures talk about him, yelling at waiters, yelling at receptionists, even yelling at his own kids if they don't give him enough attention. It's like he's the sun and everyone else is just a planet revolving around him.
You've hit the nail on the head. At the core of narcissism is this inflated sense of self-importance, this unshakable belief that they're special, that they deserve special treatment, regardless of what they've actually achieved or how their behavior affects other people.
And like the other types, empathy seems to be missing entirely. They're so focused on their own needs and desires that they're just blind to the needs of others.
Precisely. And the source material really stresses this point. It emphasizes the narcissist's diminished capacity to understand or share the feelings of others. They're trapped in their own little world, a world where their needs and their feelings are all that matter.
Okay, so give me the clinical definition. What exactly is narcissistic personality disorder? Is it just being selfish, or is there more to it?
Narcissistic personality disorder is characterized by this pervasive pattern of grandiosity, a constant need for admiration, and a very obvious lack of empathy. This can look different in different people. It might be an exaggerated sense of self-importance or a constant need for attention and praise. They feel entitled to special treatment and often exploit others to get what they want, all while being completely oblivious to the pain they're causing.
The audio talked about a difference between healthy narcissism and pathological narcissism. Is there actually such a thing as healthy narcissism?
It's an interesting point. Some self-confidence, some self-esteem, that's healthy.
Right.
We all need that to get through life. It's what lets us set boundaries, go after our goals, believe in ourselves. But when these traits become too much, when they're combined with a lack of empathy and exploitative behavior, that's when it crosses the line into NPD.
So it's like a spectrum. A little self-love is good, but too much can be toxic. It's like the volume knob on empathy is turned way down, and the volume knob on self-importance is cranked up to the max.
That's a great analogy. It really gets to the heart of it.
So what are the roots of narcissism? What causes someone to develop this kind of personality? Is it just bad parenting, or are there other things going on?
Like with the other zero negative types we talked about, the causes are complex. There are a lot of layers. Early childhood experiences probably play a big role, but there are a few different theories out there.
The usual suspects, like abuse and neglect.
Those are definitely possibilities, just like with BPD and psychopathy. But with narcissism, there's also this interesting theory that it can actually come from the opposite. Too much praise, too much admiration.
Hold on. So being treated like a prince or princess can backfire. I always thought a little spoiling wouldn't hurt.
It is a little counterintuitive. The idea is that if you're always telling a child they're special, they're talented, they deserve special treatment, without any real feedback, any boundaries, it can create this inflated sense of self that's not based in reality. They develop a distorted self-image, this belief that they're better than everyone else, and that feeds their sense of entitlement and their lack of empathy.
It's like they're looking in a funhouse mirror. They're seeing this warped reflection of themselves that doesn't match reality.
That's a perfect way to describe it. And that distorted self-image can have a huge impact on their relationships. They might be charming and charismatic on the surface, but underneath there's this desperate need for admiration that can never really be satisfied.
Okay, so we've got these three distinct personality types. Borderlines, who are, struggling with emotional instability and a fear of abandonment. Psychopaths, who show this callous disregard for others and engage in risky behaviors. And narcissists, who demand constant admiration and exploit others to get their needs met. But what ties them all together? What's the common thread?
That's the brilliance of these lectures you've provided. They all highlight the common denominator.
Right.
0 degrees of empathy.
So even though they might look different on the surface, they all share this fundamental disconnect, this inability to really understand or share the feelings of others. It's like they're speaking different languages. The words might be the same, but the emotional meaning is lost in translation.
That's a really insightful observation, and it explains why these individuals can be so difficult to deal with, whether it's the borderline's frantic attempts to avoid being abandoned, the psychopath's chilling lack of remorse, or the narcissist's insatiable need for admiration. They're all operating from a place of emotional detachment.
It's like they're missing a key piece of the human puzzle, the piece that lets us connect with each other on a deeper level. This has been really eye-opening so far, but now I'm wondering, is there a physical explanation for this lack of empathy? The lectures mentioned some brain abnormalities associated with BPD and psychopathy, but could you find similar differences in the brains of narcissists?
That's a great question, and it gets to the cutting edge of the research in this field. While the research on narcissism is still, behind that on BPD and psychopathy, there are some really intriguing findings starting to emerge.
So are you saying it's possible that narcissism isn't just a personality flaw, but a reflection of actual neurological differences? That's a pretty radical idea.
It is. It challenges, how we've traditionally thought about personality and behavior. But as brain imaging technology gets better, we're seeing more and more evidence suggesting that these personality types might might actually have distinct neural signatures.
So it's not just about, bad parenting or a lack of willpower. There might be a biological component, a difference in how their brains are wired that makes it hard for them to empathize with others.
Exactly. It's this complex interplay of nature and nurture, genes and environment, all shaping how people perceive and respond to the world.
This raises a huge question. If these zero negative personality types are linked to differences in the brain, how should we approach punishment and rehabilitation? Our legal system is built on the idea of free will and personal responsibility. But if these individuals are literally wired differently, does that change things? Do we need to rethink our whole approach to crime and punishment?
Those are big questions, and there are no easy answers.
Yeah.
If someone is biologically predisposed to lack empathy, can we hold them accountable for their actions in the same way we would someone who has a fully functioning empathy circuit? It's a debate that's happening right now in legal and ethical circles, and it's only going to get more intense as we learn more about the neuroscience of empathy.
It's a lot to
Or
think about.
it is. But it's a conversation we need to have as a society. Understanding the complexities of empathy, both its presence and its absence, is crucial if we want to create a more just and compassionate world.
It's like we're being asked to rethink our whole definition of what it means to be, bad or evil. It's not as simple as we thought when we were kids.
You've got it. If we just reduce these complex people to labels
Mm.
like borderline, psychopath, narcissist, we miss the human story, underneath it all.
And those labels, like you said before, they're not even official diagnoses sometimes. They're just shortcuts, but they don't really capture the whole person.
Exactly. It's like trying to describe a whole symphony by just listening to one instrument. You're missing the complexity, the way all the different parts work together.
So how do we even begin to deal with these issues of punishment and rehabilitation if we're questioning the whole idea of personal responsibility? It's like a philosophical minefield.
It is, and it's a debate that's probably going to go on for a long time. But the lectures you share, they offer some interesting ideas. It
Yeah.
suggests that maybe, just maybe, 0 degrees of empathy doesn't have to be a life sentence.
But wait, are you saying there's hope for these individuals that they
Wow.
can change even if the brains are wired differently?
The lectures are clear that these zero negative personality types, they're not necessarily set in stone. They're definitely more persistent than just a passing mood. But there's always potential for growth, for change, especially with the right kind of help.
Okay, so it's not a hopeless situation. But how do we even start to address these deeply rooted problems, especially when traditional therapy often depends on appealing to a person's conscience, their sense of guilt, and those might be missing in these individuals.
That's the big question, and it's something that researchers and therapists are really struggling with. The key seems to be understanding the specific needs and challenges of each type. For example, with borderlines, therapy often focuses on helping them manage their emotions, develop healthier ways of coping, and build stronger relationships.
So it's about giving them the tools to navigate a world that can feel really overwhelming, really scary. What about psychopaths? Is therapy even possible for them, given that they don't feel remorse and they can be so manipulative?
It's definitely tougher, but not impossible. The lectures talk about some promising therapies that focus on helping psychopaths understand how their actions affect others, develop a sense of accountability, and find other ways to meet their needs without resorting to manipulation or hurting people.
So instead of trying to make them feel empathy, which might not work, we're trying to teach them the real world consequences of their actions and help them find ways to interact with the world that are less destructive.
Exactly. It's a harm reduction approach. We're recognizing
Yeah.
that while we might not be able to change, how their brains are wired, we can try to steer their behavior in a more positive direction.
What about narcissists? They seem so stuck in their self-importance, so resistant to any kind of feedback, any kind of self-reflection. Is there any hope for them?
Narcissism is often seen as the toughest of the three types to treat, and that's because of that resistance to change. They often don't see themselves as having a a problem. It's everyone else who needs to change.
So how do you even get them to go to therapy in the first place?
That's the hardest part. Sometimes it's a crisis that brings them in, like a relationship ending, a career falling apart. Other times it's a legal problem or a health scare that forces them to look at their behavior.
So they often have to hit rock bottom before they're willing to even consider that they might need help.
Unfortunately, that's often the case. But even when they do seek treatment, it's a long, hard road. Therapy often focuses on helping them develop more realistic views of themselves, learn to empathize with others, and find satisfaction outside of constant admiration and validation.
It's like we're asking them to tear down their whole world, to rebuild their sense of self from scratch.
It's a huge undertaking, and it takes a lot of courage, a lot of commitment from both the person and the therapist.
So there's hope, but it's not a quick fix. It's a journey of self-discovery, of transformation.
Exactly, and it often involves unlearning a lifetime of ingrained patterns and defenses. It's not easy,
Yeah.
but it is possible.
This whole discussion is making me rethink how I see these personality types. It's easy to judge, to just dismiss them as bad or evil. But the more I learn, the more I realize it's much more complicated than that. There's so many factors involved, like biology, early experiences, even societal influences. All of that shapes who we become.
You're absolutely right, and that's why it's so important to approach these issues with a sense of curiosity and compassion. The lectures you share, they don't shy away from the darker parts of human nature, but they also remind us that even those who seem totally devoid of empathy are still human beings. They deserve our understanding.
It's like we need to develop empathy for those who lack empathy. It sounds kind of paradoxical, but if we want to really deal with these issues, it seems like that's the only way forward.
That's a profound statement, and it gets at a core message that runs through all these lectures.
Yeah.
The power of understanding. If we can understand the roots of these zero negative personalities, the complex mix of factors that contribute to their development, then maybe we can find more effective and more compassionate ways to help them and ultimately to help ourselves.
So it's not just about understanding these individuals for their sake. It's also for the sake of society as a whole. If we can learn to see them as more than just labels, as complex human beings who are worthy of our compassion, then maybe we can start to break down the barriers that separate us and build a more inclusive, more just society.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even when we're faced with behaviors that might seem, awful. And it's about acknowledging that
Yeah.
we all have the capacity for both darkness and light inside us.
This makes me think about a question that came up in the lectures. Can 0 degrees of empathy ever be a good thing? I gotta admit, when I first heard that, I was totally confused. How could a lack of empathy ever be beneficial?
It's a provocative question, and it really makes us question our assumptions about empathy always being good.
Yeah.
But if we really think about it, there are certain situations where being emotionally detached might actually be an advantage.
Okay, give me an example. I'm having trouble wrapping my head around this.
Think about a surgeon operating on a patient. They have to be able to focus completely on what they're doing, making life or death decisions with a steady hand. If they let themselves get too emotionally involved with every patient, it would be too much to bear.
That makes sense. They need some emotional distance to do their job well.
Exactly. And there are other professions like law enforcement or the military where a degree of emotional detachment might be necessary to make tough calls under a lot of pressure.
So it's not always black and white. There are shades of gray when it comes to empathy, and what might be a negative trait in one situation might be a necessary adaptation in another.
Exactly. The key is context, understanding the nuances of human behavior.
Yeah.
And recognizing that even empathy, which we often see as a virtue, can have its downsides if it's not balanced with other qualities like reason and objectivity.
This whole deep dive has been a roller coaster, you know. Lots of emotions, lots of insights. We've explored the darkest parts of human nature, delved into the complexities of empathy, and even questioned our own ideas about good and evil. It's a lot to take in.
It is, and it's okay to sit with these uncomfortable truths for a while. The point isn't to find easy answers, but to start a conversation, to challenge how we think, and to deepen our understanding of ourselves and each other.
I'm curious to hear what you think about a final point that was brought up in the lectures. Considering everything we've learned about the possible link between brain differences and these zero negative personality types, how should society deal with the issue of punishment versus rehabilitation? Should we focus on retribution, on making these individuals, pay for their actions, or should we prioritize understanding and empathy-based interventions, even if it feels counterintuitive?
That's a question that each of us needs to wrestle with, both as individuals and as a society. There are no easy answers, and there's no one solution that fits every situation. But maybe by understanding the intricacies of empathy, by realizing that it's not just a matter of choice or willpower, we can move toward a more nuanced and compassionate approach to justice.
It's a tough conversation to have, but it's one that's crucial if we want to create a society that's both just and humane.
And it's a conversation that requires us to face our own biases, our own fears, and our own capacity for both empathy and judgment.
This deep dive has been a profound journey into what it means to be human. We've learned that empathy is complex, it's multifaceted, it's shaped by so many things. We've explored the dark side of human nature, the depths of cruelty and indifference that some people are capable of, but we've also seen the possibility of redemption, the potential for growth and change, even in those who seem lost in their own darkness. It's like we've been given this puzzle box, and we're trying to see how all the pieces fit together. But the more we learn, the more we realize how complex and subtle this puzzle really is.
And the lectures, they don't offer, easy solutions or simple answers. They want us to really lean into the complexity, to be okay with not knowing everything, and to keep asking those difficult questions.
It's humbling to realize that we may never fully understand, the depths of human behavior, that intricate dance between nature and nurture that shapes who we are.
But that's what's so great about science, isn't it? It's a never-ending process of discovery. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, knowing that there's always another layer underneath.
And as we peel back those layers, we run into our own biases, our own assumptions about the world and the people in it. This deep dive has really made me confront my own judgments, question the easy stories I've told myself to make sense of things.
It's a process we all go through.
Yeah.
And it's really important for personal growth, for society to evolve. The more we understand about how complex human behavior is, the better equipped we are to create a world that's more just, more compassionate, more equitable.
As we've been talking about these zero negative personality types, I keep coming back to that question you asked earlier. Can 0 degrees of empathy ever be a positive thing? I've been thinking about it, and I'm starting to see how in certain situations a bit of emotional detachment might be necessary.
It's a strange idea, isn't it? We're so used to thinking of empathy as a good thing, always. But the truth is, like anything else, it can be a strength or a weakness, depending on the context.
I remember you mentioned surgeons before. It makes sense that they'd need to maintain some emotional distance to do their jobs effectively.
Exactly. Imagine a surgeon having a breakdown during every surgery. They wouldn't be able to function.
Yeah.
And it's the same for first responders, soldiers, even therapists. There are times when some detachment is necessary to protect yourself from burning out, to make good decisions when the stakes are high.
So it's not about getting rid of empathy altogether, but
No.
understanding when it's helpful and when it might, get in the way. It's like finding the right balance. Too much empathy can paralyze you, while too little can make you callous. Finding that sweet spot is what matters.
That's a fantastic analogy, and it really speaks to the nuanced view of of empathy that the lectures encourage.
Yeah.
Empathy isn't just about, feeling what other people are feeling. It's also about understanding those feelings, about being able to see the world from their perspective.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means having a little emotional distance to stay clear-headed, to stay objective.
This whole conversation has been like mind-blowing, exploring the human condition, the good, the bad, the really ugly. We've gone deep into human cruelty. We've talked about the brain science behind empathy, and we've even wrestled with the ethical questions. I feel like I've learned so much, but I also have more questions now than when we started.
And that's a good thing. The lectures, they weren't meant to give all the answers, but to spark our curiosity, to make us, question our assumptions, and to inspire us to keep exploring these really complex and fascinating questions.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is realizing that empathy it's not something you're born with or you're not. It's a skill. It's like a muscle you can build up, with practice. And even those who seem to completely lack empathy, they might still have a spark of human connection inside them, just waiting to be ignited.
That's a lovely thought, and it speaks to the power of hope, the possibility of change, even when things seem impossible.
Thank you for joining me on this deep dive into 0 degrees of empathy. It's been challenging, it's been thought-provoking, and ultimately it's been really enriching. And to you, our listener, I encourage you to keep exploring these questions, to keep challenging your own assumptions, and to keep seeking a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you.